first official session of the Practicum with a presentation by Dr. Sibyl Swift from the FDA. And as I mentioned, I'm not going to extensively introduce each of our speakers because I don't want to take time away from the valuable information that they are going to be providing. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Swift.
Thank you for the opportunity to come and present today and speak on the behalf of the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs at FDA. So I'm going to be speaking about our dietary supplement authorities, and I'd like to begin with the first. The authority for dietary supplement regulation comes from the Federal Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act, which governs all FDA-regulated commodities. And then the first law which actually defined dietary supplement regulation is the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, or DSHEA, which Dr. Coates mentioned earlier this morning. So next, I'd like to explain a little bit about DSHEA. It was incredibly important for the regulation of dietary supplements. It defined the term dietary supplement. It established requirements for new dietary ingredient pre-market review. It established the requirements for good manufacturing practices, and that it included dietary supplements under the adulteration provisions. Now, I'd also like to point out that although FDA does regulate, we don't approve dietary supplements or product labeling. So before I begin explaining our regulatory authorities, I wanted to give you a snapshot of the industry that we regulate. And these statistics are from NIH ODS and then from the CRN annual survey. So they're external data, they're not internal from ODSP. When DSHEA was originally passed in 1994, there were 600 manufacturers on the market. Today it's estimated there are approximately 7,000 registered facilities. Again, there were 4,000 products estimated about in 1994, and that market has now grown to over 75,000 products, and from a $4 billion market to a $40 billion market. So this is a massive industry which we are attempting to regulate. And so our responsibilities can be kind of delineated down to facility registration, new dietary ingredient notification, good manufacturing practices, dietary supplement labeling, structure function notifications, and then finally adverse event reporting. And I'd like to begin with facility registration. So all food facilities must register with FDA, and this is facility registration, not product registration. And this is for both domestic and foreign facilities. The requirement comes from the Bioterrorism Act of 2002 as a result of 9/11. And this was updated by the Food Safety Modernization Act in 2011 to add a requirement of a renewal and the registration of every 2 years. Fortunately, this can be done electronically. And this includes basic information, the name, the address, the responsible party, and the type of facility. And this is actually a new requirement. So we want to link the type of activity that's conducted at the facility, meaning is it a juice, food, dietary supplement product, to the type of facility itself, the manufacturer, the packager, the warehouse. And then it also finally includes an acknowledgement that FDA can inspect the facility. So Dr. Coates was kind enough to provide a definition of a dietary supplement earlier, and I'd like to take that definition just a little bit further, provide you with a little bit more detail. So a dietary supplement is just that. It's a supplement. It's meant to augment the diet, to promote health and reduce the risk of disease. And when I say supplement, I'd like to be clear about that because it's not meant to be a sole item of a meal. It's not represented for use as a conventional food, and it must be labeled as a dietary supplement. It must be intended for ingestion, so it has to be taken in through the mouth, and I have to be clear about that because it's not intranasal, it's not inhaled, it's not sublingual, it's not injectable, and we have seen products that attempt to purport to be supplements that suggest that type of use. It must contain one or more dietary ingredients, and then I've provided a list of those below: vitamins, minerals, herbs or botanicals, amino acids, and then that category that Dr. Coates mentioned that was kind of fun, the others. It's the dietary substance for use by man to supplement the diet by increasing the total dietary intake, or a concentrate, metabolite, constituent, extract, or combination of any of the above dietary ingredients. One of our most I say fun and interesting categories is the new dietary ingredient. This is the category that we get a lot of questions on. So a new dietary ingredient is an ingredient that was not marketed in a dietary supplement before October 15th of 1994, and that was, just to remind you, when DSHEA was enacted into law. It's our only pre-market authority for dietary supplements. This involves a notification and a review, but it is not an approval. We do not approve new dietary ingredients. The manufacturers or distributor is required to notify us that they intend to market this at least 75 days prior to introducing it to market. Now, the table that I've included today has 4 columns. For the purpose of today's talk, I'd like to focus on the first 3, looking from left to right. I took this table from our revised draft guidance for new dietary ingredient notifications. I want to be clear about that. It is draft. So it explains the fine details of how we can determine if something is a new dietary ingredient and if it requires a notification. So essentially, anything that was marketed in the US before October 15th, 1994 will most likely not be considered to be a new dietary ingredient and will most likely not require notification. If it wasn't marketed in the US before October 15th, 1994, but it was present in the food supply, and you can provide evidence that it was provided in the food supply for, I believe, at least 25 years, as an article used for food, then it may be a new dietary ingredient, but it most likely may not require notification. And that's the most likely part for this particular line is, has it been chemically altered or not? If it has not been chemically altered in any way, shape, or form, then it will most likely not require notification. But if it has, then the FDA reviewers and the evaluation research staff will need to see it to determine if its function or its effect has changed. And then any ingredient that wasn't marketed in the US before October 15th, 1994, and was also not present in the food supply will most likely require a new dietary ingredient notification. So a notification must include some basic information: the name, the address, signature, the name of the ingredient. It must contain a description of the product that's containing the new dietary ingredient, the proposed amount of the new dietary ingredient in the product, and then it also must include detailed information about the identity, and that's so that the evaluation and research staff can determine exactly what it is and then get a better idea of how it might affect the body. And then it also must contain the conditions of use in order for us to assess susceptible populations. And as Dr. Bailey mentioned earlier, most of supplement use, if that's primarily in some of those more susceptible populations, we definitely need to know if that's where these products are intended to be marketed or to whom they're intended to be marketed to. And finally, the history of use or other evidence of safety, establishing that the NDI will be reasonably expected to be safe. A notification is the manufacturer's basis for concluding that this product containing the NDI is reasonably expected to be safe. Therefore, we require that they provide us with ample evidence. And so that adequate history of use, the safety studies that will effectively address some of the questions, or both, or will most likely be required. And then my final statement about NDI notifications, I just want to reiterate, this is our only process where we have the ability to perform a pre-market review. And again, to remind you, the dietary supplement market has at least 75,000 products. In the 20 years since DSHEA was enacted and new dietary ingredient notifications were required, FDA has received approximately 1,000 new dietary ingredient notifications. Of those, less than 600 are unique and annually receive 40 to 50 NDINs. So yes, we would like to see more. So now I'm going to move on to good manufacturing practices. So the current good manufacturing practices, or CGMP regulations, are a large part of FDA's post-market regulation of dietary supplements. FDA published the final rule for good manufacturing practices in June of 2007. This rule it's found in the Code of Federal Regulations at 21 CFR 111, and it applies to all firms who manufacture, package, label, or hold dietary supplements, and that's for both foreign and domestic firms. And then this regulation has an strong emphasis on production and process controls, on building quality into the products, as well as the requirements for testing and raw material and in the finished product stage. And it's meant to help ensure that dietary supplement product quality, consistency, and safety are consistent throughout. And this is an extensive regulation. It covers all aspects of manufacturing, from setting up a facility to establishing personnel, through product design, production, testing, to records and record keeping. And then FDA investigators confirm CGMP compliance through hundreds of inspections each year, and non-compliance can result in FDA action. So next, dietary supplement labeling. Dietary supplements are a category of foods, so they must follow the food labeling requirements that are found in the Code of Federal Regulations at 21 CFR 101. They must be labeled as a dietary supplement, and they really must actually have the word dietary supplement or supplement facts on them so that a consumer and also FDA knows that they are meant to be a dietary supplement. So they have their own unique labeling requirements, and like I said, they have to be labeled as a dietary supplement. They must list all of the ingredients, but the ingredients need to be formatted into a supplement facts panel. For those, they don't necessarily have to provide all of the weights and the total content, but they must list everything that is supposed to be in that supplement. They also must provide the name and the location of the manufacturer. And finally, they have to provide a domestic contact, meaning the phone number, the address, for people to submit serious adverse event reports to. Dietary supplements are allowed to contain three types of claims. They're allowed to have a nutrient content claim, and an example of that would be a product that's high in calcium or low in sodium. They're allowed to have a structure function claim, and I'm going to provide you with more information about structure function claims through the rest of my presentation. So structure function claims, just overview, it describes the role of a nutrient or a dietary ingredient on literally the structure or the function of the body. And then finally, health claims or qualified health claims categorize the relationship of a substance to reducing the risk of a disease. Now, there are authorized health claims or qualified health claims, and there is specific language that has been approved and that is allowed on labels, and nothing other than that specific language. For more information about that, it's available on our website under qualified health claims or health claims. So structure function notifications are the only allowable claim, and they're unique because it separates dietary supplements from food and cosmetics, etc. It's an exemption from the drug definition. It allows claims that are made in accordance with Section 403(r)(6) of the FDAs Act. And so the allowable claims are a nutrient deficiency claim. It describes a benefit related to that ingredient for a classic nutrient deficiency. There are general well-being claims that describe general well-being from the consumption of a nutrient or dietary ingredient. And then finally, the structure function claim that, as I mentioned, describes the particular effect of that nutrient on the structure or function of the body. And then I've included the definition of a disease, the damage to an organ, part, structure, or system of the body such that it does not function properly or a state of health leading to such dysfunction. Because structure function claims are allowed to address anything but disease claims. And so now I'm going to explain that a little bit further. So a structure function notification. This is another type of review that the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs performs. Firms are required to have substantiation of their claim. Now, they're not required to submit it with their notification. However, they are required to hold it in their facility. And it's substantiation that the claim is truthful and not misleading, and there's specific language related to that. So adequate substantiation includes tests, analyses, research, studies, or other evidence based on the expertise of professionals in the relevant area that's been conducted and evaluated in an objective manner by persons qualified to do so, using procedures generally accepted in the profession to yield accurate and reliable results. So structure function notifications are also required to include the specific disclaimer language. And so this is language that most of you will have seen on a package and you wonder why it's there. It's because they're making some sort of structure function claim. They're required to state that this statement has not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. So if you see that on there, it's most likely because they've put something on their product related to the structure or function. And finally, they must notify FDA no later than 30 days after marketing the product that it contains the claim. Now, similar to NDI notifications, FDA does not approve structure function claims. We review the specific language, the text of the claim, and then the reviewers will determine that it does or does not have a disease claim included in it. And if it does, then a violative claim, they'll receive a courtesy letter. It's FDA's notifying them that they have included something on their label that suggests that the product is intended to treat or cure a disease. And then FDA field offices will follow up with the firms. Now, the only way that FDA currently, this is actually a new function, we have an electronic submission portal for our structure function notifications. So someone who sends us a structure function notification, if they don't receive anything from us, that means that we didn't have an issue with it. Now, if a firm is willing to submit through the electronic portal, they do actually receive an acknowledgement that we received it. So there's a benefit to doing that. Let's see, finally, I'd like to talk about adverse event reporting. So manufacturers are required to submit a serious adverse event report to FDA within 15 business days of determining that this event occurred. This reporting system works through FDA's MedWatch program, and submissions can be received through our electronic portal on the website, through email, through phone calls, or through letters. All types of reports will be entered into the system. Now, I mentioned that manufacturers are required to submit, but consumers and healthcare providers do it voluntarily. And we openly encourage them to do so because it helps alert us that there are problems with products or ingredients out there. And then finally, if manufacturers become aware of an issue, then they have to follow up a year later with any new or updated information. Now, to follow on to this, in speaking about what FDA's regulatory authorities are related to dietary supplements, dietary supplement adverse events are entered into the CIFSAN adverse event reporting system, the CARES database. And then all of the cases are reviewed and evaluated by the medical officers on staff to determine if any follow-up information is necessary and to determine if additional information is needed. Hopefully the reviewer will be able to determine that there's something there that's actionable that can cause a trigger for other FDA action, like for-cause inspection, consumer warnings, or recalls. Now, I'd like to mention that recently, FDA started posting CARES data files available on the website. It's a searchable database that's reported by consumer and healthcare practitioners. Data is voluntarily reported by industry, and then mandatory reports from industry. And it will eventually include all information from January of 2004 forward. Now, I'd like to finish by discussing some of FDA's activities. So, some of the regulatory activities that we have taken in recent history are against warning letter initiatives against acacia rigodula, beta-methyl phenylethylamine, DMBA, or AMP citrate, methylphenephrine, picamillan. We issued warning letters against pure powdered caffeine. And then ODSP recently supported an FDA initiative against companies that made claims that their products could prevent, diagnose, treat, mitigate, or cure cancer. And that is an ongoing initiative. Now, that's all that I had for you in terms of regulation. If you guys have any questions, please.
I have a question.
Yes.
Could you help me with what a serious adverse event is? I work in a retail pharmacy, and people bring products back all the time with a stomach ache, and we call the manufacturer because we want them to replace it, but do they have to report a stomach ache?
You know, I don't think that I'm the expert for that, but I know that we have a large amount of information related to adverse events and serious adverse events on the website.
Okay.
But by reporting it to the manufacturer, you've put the onus on them to determine if it was serious or not.
Okay, so they have to determine that. All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes.
You said you had 40 to 50 NDIs a year. Can you tell us what sorts of products they tend to be?
You mean for what type of ingredient. So
Yeah.
an NDI notification is for a type of ingredient. Honestly, they're a wide range. And it really just depends. I mean, we receive notifications for products, I mean, essentially anything that Dr. Coates mentioned in his initial presentation. And then we receive notifications mistakenly for topicals and orals and things like that. And those would receive not a dietary ingredient letter, just notifying them that that's not actually a dietary ingredient.
Do you get a lot of them for botanicals?
I don't know that I would necessarily say a lot. I mean, I think that it's fairly represented in the type of notifications that we receive, yes. All notifications are posted on regulations.gov. That is in process of being updated. So they should all be represented, especially from the most recent years. If you have a question about some of the most recent ones, they're being grouped into submissions by year. So if you'd like to have a snapshot of, say, 2016 or 2015, regulations.gov has become more searchable. Also on our website, we offer hyperlinks for 14, 15, and 16 and notifications related to. So if you'd like to have a little bit more specific information pertaining to the type of notifications, you can find those on our website.
Thank you. I'm actually thinking about botanicals that may have traditional use but have not been marketed before, and may not appear in foods.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we've received some like that. I mean, like I said, it's a full spectrum of things that we've received notifications for. For things like that, and especially if a submitter wasn't necessarily certain of how to proceed, our evaluation and research staff offers pre-notifications meetings for individuals who are interested in submitting those, just to kind of help with some of the particulars and the details and information that might be required in that notification to facilitate that process.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yes, I'm wondering, along the same lines, you were talking a little bit about how the manufacturer has to demonstrate a history of evidence of safety. Can you talk a
Yes.
little bit about what some of that safety data might be?
Absolutely. So that's actually a case-by-case basis. So in evidence of safety, first you have to look at the conditions of use. What population is this particular product suggested for? If it's suggested for average healthy adults, then you would hope that the animal experiments that were designed in order to support this would be representative of that. If it was suggested to take this particular product for a specific duration, say a shorter duration, you would want to see the experiments designed to represent that snapshot of time. Now, if you were suggesting that a product should be taken for an extended duration, then the experiments should be representative of that. So I can't say yes for this specific instance because it depends on what the conditions of use and the populations are for. Now, the revised draft guidance offers a table at the end of it, which is massive. I didn't even think that I could put it on a screen this size. I think it takes 2 pages to provide a better suggestion of the type of studies that would be appropriate to use as evidence of safety. Now, if someone's trying to use a history of use, then that's different. That's typically a minimum of 25 years, evidence of 25 years of history of consumption in human population to provide ample evidence. Did that answer your question? You're welcome. Yes.
Yeah. So I've done some reading, and it suggests that the adverse drug events reporting from the FDA database might be less than 10% of what's actually occurring. So I'm wondering if there's anything that you're looking at and trying to improve that pharmacovigilance around that.
I do have indications that it is quite low. The specific percent, I think, is still up for debate. I know that the CARES database and FDA's MedWatch program, they're looking at ways to amend that notification process to make it user-friendly. And then it's just word of mouth. It's consumer advocacy. It's putting information out there to educate populations that we really are looking for that type of information. And then it's not only analyzing that serious adverse event reporting information, it's looking at other databases as well that might be useful.
I have a question regarding intravenous vitamins and minerals.
Yes.
And so I saw companies where they provide, they actually go to your home or your office, and they would hook you up with an IV and give you 50 grams plus vitamin C and other minerals. So I was wondering, what are the regulations and guidelines for that?
That sounds like a product that the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research would regulate, because anything that is not ingested orally, that's an injectable, would be considered to be a drug. And so that's outside of our purview. Yes.
I'm not sure which speaker, if you're the right speaker to ask this question,
Okay.
but I am interested in what the FDA's opinion about agricultural or industrial hemp is.
I don't believe I'm the right person for that.
Okay. All right, thank you. I think
You're
I'll
welcome.
ask all the speakers and see who knows it. Okay, thank you.
Well, I'm happy that I was the first. Yes.
Okay.
Hi. How easy or onerous is it for the FDA to move up from precaution to recall? So say with something like Hyland's homeopathic teething tablets, does the agency have to go and gather a lot of evidence to do that, or just have some sort of reasonable concern?
I think it would depend on the signal and depend on the type of product. That's another one of those that's case by case, I would think.
So something with infants and belladonna alkaloids, it's easier to go to recall because of the risk versus...
Yeah, so that's an instance it's difficult to say specifically for each case. I think, I mean, it depends on each case as it's determined what level of evidence is required. And then the agency would move forward as quickly as it could. I think in any instance where recall might be necessary, but I mean, I can't tell you exactly how many days it would take for us to move from point A to point B on that.
It's very case by case. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. You mentioned that sublinguals are not considered dietary supplements.
That's correct.
Such as sublingual B12. Where would that be regulated then, if not by the FDA?
That sounds like a homeopathic, and I believe that homeopathics are regulated by CEDAR.
Right, thank
So it's not that it's not regulated by FDA, it's just not regulated by ODSP.
One question.
Yes.
So there are products out there in the market and companies that actually, represent sort of a meld between a food and a dietary supplement. Things like, products that are either fortified or with some added compounds that would fit in the category of dietary supplements. As far as my understanding, in some scenarios, it is up to the company to decide to market whether they're going to market that product as a food or as a dietary supplement. Can you comment on that, and also what would be the regulatory oversight in the scenario of a food, sort of with some supplement inside it?
So if I understand your question, you're asking me, is it up to the manufacturer to determine how a product should be sold, if it should be sold as a dietary supplement or sold as a food product? And so we regulate based upon what the labeling states. And so if it states that it is a dietary supplement, meaning that they intended to sell it as a dietary supplement, then we regulate it as such. If they state on the labeling that it's intended to be sold as a food, then that doesn't fall underneath the Office of Dietary Supplement Programs purview. I'm not saying that we don't regulate it, or it's not regulated at all. It just doesn't fall under our specific purview.
So the level of oversight would be like any other food, basically.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. Like the GMP standards also for manufacturing would apply? Or?
I can't really speak to food products and how they're regulated. That's actually outside of my knowledge base. But for dietary supplements, yes, they would be subject to all of the CGMP regulations.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. No other questions? Great. Thank you, guys.